(267-495-4866) is the phone number, or DougCarnsProgram@gmail.com is the email. You can email us at any time with any questions, concerns, comments, hate mail, love mail, whatever. Or if you just want to say hi to Joe, you can say hi to Joe if you want. This is the Doug Karns Program here on All Noise Radio. I am your host, Doug Karns. All right, so we're finishing up with the how we were talking about Obama and his awesome State of the Union addresses. And let's just play, Joe, this one little snippet from last year about how he wanted spending freezes for the country.
Now, the final critical step.
Joe, it's the final critical step.
The very last one.
So this is the thing he wanted done. The final critical step. Let's listen.
In winning the future is to make sure we aren't buried under a mountain of debt.
Okay,
Wow.
so we cannot be buried under
I'm glad
a
he
huge
noticed
amount
that.
of debt.
I'm glad he pointed that out.
Yeah. Now, what would you consider a huge amount of debt?
Oh, a couple million, couple billion. No, we're talking trillions.
No, I'd probably say, at this rate, I would say, if we're not buried yet, I'd probably say, maybe 300 trillion. I would say that's where it starts to get painful. It hurts just a little bit to have all that money on top of you.
I think 300 trillion is just about the right dollar amount.
I mean, that's where it just starts hurting a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean,
right now it's nothing.
Yeah, once you get into 500 trillion, 600 trillion, now
that hurts.
That really hurts.
The weight of that cash.
So we're good right now. We're only at 15 trillion.
We are living with a legacy of deficit spending that began almost a decade ago.
All right.
Almost a decade ago.
If you're familiar with this show, it takes us forever to get through sound clips. But so he says this began a little bit over a decade ago. Now, he's implying, Joe, that Mr. George W. Bush,
of course, started
spending he's way out of control. I mean, he was spending like a rich kid, like Paris Hilton, out on the streets of Manhattan.
I mean, he's not lying, but he's
Bush,
nowhere close to where Obama is.
Yeah, but this is where I get annoyed because people say that we started with a surplus after Clinton. No, we had a budget surplus. So our budget was I forget what the number was. It was like $600 billion, and we only spent $400 billion that year.
Well, budget is too long of a word to say.
Yeah, so we just say surplus.
Yeah, just a surplus.
But people get that confused that we didn't have a surplus. We had a debt then. We had $5 trillion in debt after Clinton left office. And then Bush came in for his 8 years and added another $5 trillion.
That just killed our surplus.
That totally killed our surplus. The very little budget surplus that we had. Now, you might say, well, $5 trillion, that's not much.
That's not
in 8
600
years.
trillion.
No, it's not 600 trillion at all.
Not yet.
We're not hurting. We're not even feeling that money yet. But, so Bush did $5 trillion in 8 years. Joe, take a guess of how much Obama has added to the deficit in 3 years. 3 years.
Wow. That's a good question. I can't even count it on my fingers.
No, you can't. No.
It's a little bit more than that. I don't know.
It's more than $5.
You think?
It might be.
It might be. Huh.
Maybe like $5 trillion in the last 3 years.
Wow.
Now, we'll get to him saying this last year about a spending freeze and how we can't be buried under a large amount of debt. From George Washington. Now, as you know, Joe, he is the first president of the United States. So
Yes.
from George Washington all the way to Clinton, our national debt was $5 trillion. Okay? So we racked up $5 trillion over 230-odd years.
Yeah. 42 presidents.
Yeah. Now, Bush, our awesome Republican president that I came to hate a lot, he doubled that. He was like, you know what? What's another $5 trillion? He doubled that with his prescription drug program and all that stuff.
Yeah, no big deal.
No. So he doubled that.
Okay,
so in 8 years, we doubled a 200-year deficit. And then...
I'm surprised it took that long.
Yeah.
8 years.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
a long time. And then Obama comes in. He's on pace. If he gets reelected for another 4 years, he's on pace to double the debt, just him alone, another $10 trillion to match from George Washington to George Bush.
Man, $10 trillion in 8 years.
That's a lot of money. I mean, talk about being buried in the debt. Like I said in the last segment, every 60 seconds the debt is going up $3 million. We are spending $3 million every minute of the day.
Where has common sense gone?
I don't know.
It's just disappeared in Washington.
I mean, if you want to put that in layman's terms, that's like you in the average household spending $300 every minute. You'll never survive. You'll never survive. You're just racking up so much debt during the day and week and month to the point where you're not going to be able to get out of it. And that's where we're pretty much at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, our debt to GDP ratio is over 100%. And analysts said once you got to that point, there's no going back. The only way you go back is if you start over again. And I don't think any of us want to see that.
And not many people realize how ugly this is getting.
No.
Or how ugly it's been.
I didn't realize it until about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
People need to start waking up to it and pay attention to it. Because one day you're going to wake up and you're not going to recognize anything. Especially what's happening over the EU. I didn't see you last week. Have you paid attention to what's going on in the EU?
Here and there.
About how all the credit ratings dropped, like at least 10 of them. And now Germany is starting to back away, say, hey, we're not going to help any of you troubling countries out, because why would they?
Yeah, that whole EU was a mistake in the first place.
Yes, it was.
Disaster.
And the guy who created the EU is now the head honcho in Italy. They took over, I don't know if anybody's paid attention to this, but they fundamentally changed Italy's government in the last 2 weeks to be a fascist country now. They put all these bureaucrats in place with no elections, nobody voting. They just took it over. And the guy who created the EU is now head of Italy. Wow. And he said back in, when did they do the EU? Like 2000, 99?
Probably in the late 90s, yeah.
Yeah. He said, he basically wanted to change everything to socialism. But he says he couldn't do it right now because the political climate would not allow it. But he said one day there will be a crisis where we can change everything.
Oh.
And guess what? Here's your crisis. The EU is about to collapse. And it's going to collapse right into their hands where they can change everything. And that's what everybody's trying to do here in America. And I hate to say it, Obama's one of them. And I like I said, was it us a couple weeks ago we were talking about how we thought Obama was a good guy, and personally,
oh yeah, he's a wonderful guy.
Yeah, so I don't think he's that bad of a guy, but I think his policies
as a president, though,
yeah, he's collapsing us into this nasty socialism, net. And as Rahm Emanuel said,
don't let a crisis go to waste.
Yeah, never let a good crisis go to waste, because you use that to your advantage, because people are scared they need to follow someone. That's why everybody followed Hitler back in the 1940s. Or, I'm sorry, 1930s.
Yeah.
Because he said, I'll get you out of this. And as he made the people believe him more and more, he started getting his way by, killing Jews. I mean, Hitler didn't come about overnight. It took years until he got to where he was.
Yeah, like it took a crisis. People got desperate after things kept failing.
Yep.
And then they just looked to whoever was willing to step up.
Exactly. Anyways, I don't know how we get to Hitler after talking about the State of the Union from last year, but that is the Doug Karns program here on All Noise Radio.
In the wake of the financial crisis, some of that was necessary to keep credit flowing, save jobs, and put money in people's pockets. But now that the worst of the recession is over, we have to confront the fact that our government spends more than it takes in. Wow. He's very profound there.
Yeah, we'll confront it by raising the debt ceiling.
Yeah, he asked last year to raise the debt ceiling, so Congress raised it. But Congress said no more. We're not raising it again. He comes again this month and says we need to raise it again. So, all right, let's just let him. We'll come back and talk about it.
That is not sustainable. Every day, families sacrifice to live within their means. They deserve a government that does the same.
Yay! All right.
So tonight,
standing ovation. You know, everybody believes he wants to do this. But, all right.
I am proposing that starting this year, we freeze annual domestic spending for the next 5 years. Now, this would reduce the deficit by more than $400 billion over the next decade.
Okay. So, first off, he said spending freeze on annual domestic spending. Did that happen, Joe?
No.
Okay.
Not even close.
Then he said if we did this, it would take $400 billion off the deficit in a decade.
Wow.
Now, I'm not a math major, but at the time he gave the speech, our debt was just about to hit $14 trillion. $400 billion is a lot less than $14 trillion.
A little bit, yeah.
If you put it
over a decade, too.
Over a decade.
Not even a century. So just a decade.
You're basically trimming $1 off, every minute.
Wow.
Like, yeah, I have that $3 million for spending a minute. We'll just take $1 off.
Yeah. No big deal.
That's like me being a fat ass at McDonald's and ordering 5 Big Macs and 4 fries and saying, you know what? I'm just throwing one of these fries out.
Yeah, just order 3 fries.
I'm going on a diet,
Yeah.
and I'm going to be better. I'm going to cut the spending, or I'm going to cut this eating by 1 fry.
Yeah, it's a start.
And each day, I just take 1 fry out of my basket of 4 fries. Eventually, right? I'll get skinny.
Yeah.
That sounds about right.
It'll take a few hundred years. But
Eating 5,000 calories and then taking 10 calories out of it, I'm totally going to get skinny. This is absurd. Like, this makes no sense. And he promised in the State of the Union, this is why it's just so bogus, these presidents with these states, like, just...
It's mind-boggling how...
They either promise you something, they lie to your face, they'll say something and just not do it, or do the exact opposite. Now, he said, Joe, I just did my taxes last night. He said taxes weren't going to go up for anybody under $250,000. Well, I noticed from last year to this year, I'm paying almost an extra $800 in taxes. Wow. Now, I don't make that much money, but that's a lot of money for somebody like me. So, and I certainly make under $250,000 a year. So why did my taxes go up? He promised last year in the State of the Union, anybody under $250,000, your taxes will not go up at all.
Can't explain it. You can't rely on Obama's word.
You can't.
You can't.
And see,
or anybody's for
and
that
this
matter.
goes before we go to the break. This goes back to why the president should not have any power in this in any way when it comes to legislation, taxes, or anything like that. This is where us, the people, are supposed to decide it. We're supposed to come up with what we want taxed, not the president. We're giving this guy way too much power. Yeah. And we'll get to a couple stories later in the show about warrantless GPS tracking and all that stuff, because this president and the TSA with Rand Paul, this president and his agencies in the executive branch are getting way too powerful, and Congress is getting they're weakening each year, because from Bush, from the Patriot Act to now to Obama, the presidency is getting way too strong. All right, we'll be right back after this.